Welcome back. Today's lecture is on reproduction and maybe a little bit about development. So here you see a picture, and hopefully you can recognize those two animals as earthworms, and those two earthworms are copulating. So a little bit review. Do you remember what phylum earthworms belong to? Hopefully you're thinking Annelida. Now, when you work through the study guide on chapter 46, one thing it asks you about this picture. They ask you, well, who's the daddy? You have two earthworms mating, and which one's the daddy? Well, the surprising answer is both of them are, because earthworms contain both male and female gonads, and hopefully you remember that's called what? Yes, they are hermaphrodites. So the egg this structure here is called the clitellum, and it produces eggs. So this worm is fertilizing the eggs of this worm, and this worm is fertilizing the eggs of this worm. So this is just to remind us of two things: that once that animals reproduce almost exclusively sexually, not totally, but that's the predominant form. And second of all, we view the human animal as sort of the norm, but what might be normal for us might be very weird to the rest of the animal kingdom, and what is totally natural for the rest of the animal kingdom, like for instance being a hermaphrodite, might be considered unusual with humans. So just to review some basic things here. Hopefully you've reviewed, when you work through the study guide, you will review on your own the differences between sexual and asexual reproduction. And actually, I'll review these evolutionary trends with you later. Hopefully you did the pre-assignment, the pre-reproduction assignment, because I'm not going to take half of a college lecture to review the basic parts of male and female anatomy, which I hope you learned in 4th grade. So if you have not done the pre-repro assignment, be sure to do that before listening to the rest of this lecture. And hopefully you reviewed the concept of negative feedback, which we defined as a hormone regulating its own production, because that will be very important in today's lecture. And final piece to review is we talked about how part of the brain, the hypothalamus, is very critical when it comes to regulating hormones. So as with all sections of your brain, it's nourished by blood. There's blood vessels running through it. And your hypothalamus is sort of like the thermostat of the body. It's always monitoring and sensing blood hormone levels, glucose levels, oxygen levels, and the example we worked through last time was internal body temperature. So the first thing we're going to do is to look at the parts of the male reproductive system. So hopefully you have out your male anatomy lecture guide. Now, not to insult the guys, but we're not going to spend as much time on the male reproductive system because basically it's just a series of tubes. Hopefully you read about these in your pre-assignment. You know that sperm are formed in the seminiferous tubules by meiosis. So if we look here, we see the testes and the diagram of the testes. Now, I do not do this at home, but if you would remove the scrotum, again, do not do this at home, and look at the testes, you would see all these white coiled tubules. You know, it looks sort of like angel hair pasta. All right, so these are the seminiferous tubules, and they are the site of, sperm production. That button is a bit sensitive there. There are about 600 meters of coiled up tubules in the male reproductive systems. So again, a lot of surface area producing a lot of sperm. The sperm, when they're first made, they do not know how to swim. So this next tube here, this flattened sac, the epididymis, this is where the sperm mature, and this is where they learn how to swim. And then finally, when it's time to make a quick exit, the sperm go through the vas deferens and then through the urethra and out the body. So that is a quick and dirty overview of the structures of the male reproductive system. What I want to talk about next, though, is the male hormonal cycle. Now you're probably thinking, I didn't even know that the males had a hormonal cycle. And also we're on the next page of your lecture guide. I have the sperm there, but you can review the parts of the sperm on your own. So how does this work? All right. The male hormonal cycle starts off when there's low levels of the male sex hormone, testosterone, in the bloodstream. That's the stimulus. And again, the hypothalamus is the part of the brain that senses the low levels of sex hormones. And so when we have a stimulus, we will also have a response. So the hypothalamus, in response to the low levels of testosterone, secretes a hormone called, are you ready for this? Gonadotropin releasing hormone, which we will abbreviate as GnRH. So most of the hormones secreted by the hypothalamus have the abbreviation RH because they are called releasing hormones, and they are going to stimulate the anterior pituitary to release something. In this case, the anterior pituitary is going to release the gonadotropins. So do you remember what a tropic hormone is? Go think about that. Review your notes for a minute. Okay, a tropic hormone is a hormone that acts upon another endocrine gland. So if this hormone is called a gonadotropin releasing hormone, okay, a gonadotropin is going to be a hormone that acts on the gonads. So here we have our scenario here. Hopefully you remember from last class that there's our capillaries, right, connecting directly. That's sort of a squiggly capillary. It should be much smoother than that. So GnRH is going to travel down these little capillaries directly from the male brain to the anterior pituitary gland. And the gonadotropin releasing hormone is going to stimulate the anterior pituitary to release the gonadotropins, which are, did you review this? FSH and LH. So in the male, FSH and LH are released together by the anterior pituitary. So in your lecture guide, you have a little brain, you have a little pituitary, and you can draw the little pituitary releasing FSH and LH. All right, since FSH and LH are the gonadotropins, where do you think they're going to go? You might think they're going to go to the gonads. Well, okay, they go into the bloodstream, but as they circulate throughout the male's body, their target site is the cells in the testes. Now, to review, a male testes makes two things. The testes makes sperm, and the testes also makes testosterone. So, as I just said, FSH and LH, they're released together, they circulate throughout the whole male's body, but their target cells are in the testes. And they stimulate the testes to produce sperm and testosterone. So let's look at this. Specifically, FSH stimulates spermatogenesis. All right, in response to FSH, the cells of the seminiferous tubules undergo meiosis and sperm are produced. The Sertoli cells, they don't produce the sperm, they nourish the sperm. They're also known as nerve cells for this reason. So FSH and LH are released by the anterior pituitary together. They affect the testes. Specifically, FSH causes sperm production. LH stimulates other cells in the testes called the Leydig cells. So that's sort of easy to remember. L for LH, L for Leydig. And they cause the Leydig cells to produce testosterone. Okay? So, when does this start happening in the human male? Well, when the human male hits puberty, the hypothalamus starts secreting GnRH. GnRH stimulates the pituitary to release FSH and LH, and so his body starts cranking out the FSH and LH, and he makes lots of sperm and lots of testosterone, and lots of sperm and lots of testosterone, and boom, his testes explode from all the sperm. Well, no, obviously that's not what happens, because both sperm levels and testosterone levels are regulated once again by negative feedback. So an important thing to realize by this, since FSH and LH are released together and acting on the testes at the same time, the testes produces both testosterone and sperm at the same time. So there's an increase in both blood testosterone and sperm production. All right, let's explore the effects of testosterone a little bit more. So as a male hits puberty, his blood testosterone levels increase. And what happens? The testosterone circulates throughout the male's bloodstream, and it affects cells all over the male's body. One thing testosterone does is promote the development of what's called the secondary sex characteristics. So maybe you had this in Bio 151, or maybe you didn't. Secondary sex characteristics are not absolutely critical to have sexual reproduction. However, These are used to attract members of the opposite sex. So, and testosterone in vertebrate animals produces that male animal's secondary sex characteristics. So for instance, let's say you were a male bird, let's say a cardinal. Testosterone allows the male cardinal to have the bright red feathers, which attracts the female. Birds have excellent color vision, by the way. If you were a male peacock, the testosterone would cause you to have those beautiful tail feathers, and you can shimmy and shake those to attract the peahen. Likewise, a male lion, the male lion, African lion, has a nice great big mane, and that is due to the effects of testosterone. Now, is the mane of a lion absolutely critical for a male lion to mate with a female lion? And the answer is no. However, when he has this big mane, he has shown the female he is a very healthy specimen, and it's used to attract her. Mate with me, you want me to sire your cubs. All right, well, let's talk about humans, though. What happens to a human male's body when he hits puberty? What are the effects of testosterone? Can you think of any? All right, they include the deepening of the voice. Again, does a male absolutely need a deep voice to attract women? No, but most women, if they get a phone call and some guy says, "Hi there, want to hang out with me?" It just might not float their boat. However, if a female gets a phone call and she hears, "Hi there," well, I'm not a guy, I can't really do it. But anyway, a deep voice is attractive to women. So, secondary sex characteristics in the human male. What happens in puberty? The deepening of the voice, development of facial hair, he gets a beard. Increased muscle growth is an important secondary sex characteristic in the human male. And also actually increased aggression is another characteristic associated with increased testosterone levels. We just named some, and you can read more about this in page 1010 of your textbook. All right, high level of testosterone also exerts negative feedback on the hypothalamus. It shuts it off. Why is this important? So let's go back to our little diagram here. When we have a high level of testosterone, it shuts off the hypothalamus. It exerts what we call negative feedback on the hypothalamus. Why is this important? Because there are optimal levels of sperm and production, and this keeps the levels optimal. All right. After we've exerted negative feedback, the hypothalamus stops stimulating the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary stops releasing FSH and LH, and the testosterone level eventually decreases. Why? Remember the liver. The liver is always inactivating hormones. So basically, if you look at the male hormonal cycle, let's say you have an optimal level of testosterone. So this is what this dotted line is going to represent. So we have an optimal level of blood testosterone concentration. All right, so this is what the y-axis represents, and the x-axis represents time. When there's low level blood testosterone, the hypothalamus senses this, it clicks on, it stimulates the anterior pituitary, which stimulates the testes to produce testosterone. But when the levels get too high, this exerts negative feedback on the hypothalamus. It shuts down the whole system, and the liver starts to inactivate the testosterone, and it gradually falls. When it gets too low, this is not smooth, but you can imagine it, the hypothalamus clicks on. When it gets too high, it clicks off, clicks on. You get the idea. So actually, the male hormonal cycle is very predictable, very regular. This will differ dramatically as opposed to when we look at the female hormonal level. All right, once again, when you have low hormonal levels, the hypothalamus clicks on. It senses the low level of hormones and stimulates the anterior pituitary. Hopefully this makes sense. Okay, we're going to make a couple more points about the male hormonal cycle. And you can put this in your male or female lecture guide, I don't care. The FSH and LH are named for their functions in females. It's the same hormones. You can switch out a male or female pituitary. They affect gonads, but they have different reactions in the ovaries and testes. So you need to know this, yes. FSH actually stands for follicle stimulating hormone, and this will make a whole lot more sense in a few minutes. And LH stands for luteinizing hormones. So FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone, LH stands for luteinizing hormone. One more note, there's another hormone, remember those nurse cells which help nourish the sperm? They produce another hormone named inhibin that also exerts negative feedback on the system. So there's a redundancy here to allow the male's body to produce optimal levels of both sperm and testosterone. So this is a little diagram right out of your textbook. And again, so the Sertoli cells, they nourish the sperm and promote spermatogenesis, but they're producing inhibin, which exerts negative feedback. Luteinizing hormones stimulates the Leydig cells to produce testosterone, which also exerts negative feedback. So before we close out the male, I'm going to give you another Dr. House moment. An athlete is taking illegal anabolic steroids. Now, I'm sure all of you have heard of anabolic steroids before, but maybe what you didn't know, when you hear of an athlete abusing steroids, they are taking an artificial form of testosterone. Now, why do they take this? I think most of you know is they take the synthetic testosterone to increase muscle mass and therefore increase performance. So these are the two questions I want you to contemplate before we come back. And the two questions are as follows. What will you predict will happen to this athlete's muscle mass and why? So will it really increase his muscle mass or is this just an urban legend? And the second question I want you to ponder is, what do you predict will happen to this athlete's sperm count and why? So think about it and talk it over with Dr. House, and we'll see you back here in the next lecture.